So this is a scene from Young Sheldon, the precursor sequel or prequel to The Big Bang Theory. It's a really really great show, and been watching it with my parents, and yeah, I really like this scene a lot. It hits me on a lot of on a lot of personal levels, and I think emotional levels as well. So without further ado.
Can I sit with you?
I think Mommy needs to be alone right now.
All right. Mom, I'm scared.
Why?
You didn't go to church. You stopped saying grace. I don't understand what's going on.
It's kind of hard to explain.
Is it me? Did I do something wrong?
Of course not. Come here. Sheldon. Faith means believing in something you can't know for sure is real. And right now, I am struggling with that.
So you don't believe in God anymore?
That isn't something for you to worry about. I need to figure this out myself.
Can I help? Maybe I could provide a fresh perspective.
I don't think so, baby.
Did you know that if gravity were slightly more powerful, the universe would collapse into a ball?
I did not.
Also, if gravity were slightly less powerful, the universe would fly apart and there'd be no stars or planets.
Where are you going with this, Sheldon?
It's just that gravity is precisely as strong as it needs to be. And if the ratio of the electromagnetic force to the strong force wasn't 1%, life wouldn't exist. What are the odds that would happen all by itself?
Why are you trying to convince me to believe in God? You don't believe in God.
I don't, but the precision of the universe at least makes it logical to conclude there's a creator.
Baby, I appreciate what you're trying to do. But logic is here. And my problem is here.
Well, there are 5 billion people on this planet, and you're the perfect mom for me. What are the odds of that?
Thank you, Lord, for this little boy.
I knew I could fix it.
Oh. Maybe it was you and the Lord.
I don't like sharing credit, but I knew in that moment it wasn't the appropriate time to say it.
Yeah, that's I'm really glad you played that.
Yeah, I love that scene. And as a highly religious person, I've talked about the existence of God with many people, some who agree with me and some who don't. And I think what that scene reminds me is that there's a lot of scientific evidence that supports the existence of God. There's a lot of scientific evidence that doesn't. And I think on both sides, you could argue until the cows come home and not really get to a definitive conclusion. And I think his second attempt on a much more personal level, when he says, and this is my quote, there are 5 billion people on this planet and you're the perfect mom for me. What are the odds of that? It reminds me that it's those human examples that are way more important. And I think there are a lot of very, very undeniable elements of life that make it really difficult to explain life without God. Why we feel love, why we like music, right? Why we're emotionally motivated to help other people and why it makes us feel good when others are happy, right? Um, Things of that nature that I could throw out countless scientific and logical examples that support that argument, but it's those human ones that I think are almost impossible, if not impossible, to debate. Um, and I think that it's something that I certainly live by. Um, and Jesus, I'm paraphrasing again, I apologize, but there's a line in a verse in the Bible that essentially says, we can interpret, the clouds in the sky, right? We can walk outside basically and tell that it's going to rain before it does, right? We don't need a weatherman to tell us that. Um, and I think that's entirely true, right? We have feelings and we have emotions that, you know, are a lot more dependable, I think, than our brains are in a lot of instances. And I like also when she says that logic is up here and my problem is here. And I think what that reminds me is that logic, I think is often seen as a precursor to emotions and decisions, and I kind of see it in the opposite way. I think our emotions and our feelings, and our heart and our soul is the precursor to everything that we do, and I think logic can help explain that and can help um, guide that in certain ways. But I don't think it can be the driving force in the choices that we make, whether we realize that or not.
I've thought a lot about like what is like faith recently.
Mm-hmm.
When I say recently, probably for the past like 2 years.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that faith is not in believing in the things you can explain, but it's
Yeah.
believing in the things you can't explain. It's believing in the irrational. Um, like it's great to be living in a world where you try to explain everything and rationalize all things, and certainly there is a lot of attempts to do so. And there is an argument that doing so um, can also be a proof of God. But for me, I'm personally more interested in the things that we can't explain. And I think there's a common tendency to try to come up with explanations for everything
Yeah.
because we want to understand certain things. We want to understand why such and such happened, why such and such happened. And I found myself being more content with actually just letting go of trying to understand and rationalize, um, and just accept that you know they're like, because any attempt that I try to make sense of it, um, always has gaps. It always has gaps, and that's why science progresses as it does, because we're always correcting for mistakes, for gaps, and explanations for things. And I think that's part of the reason I have difficulty with that I've had difficulty with like science. I would say, like, okay, that sounds bad, but like difficulty,
I
with
have difficulty with
studying
science.
like cosmological explanations and things like that, because there is always gaps and there is always the unexplained. And I get the inclination to explain, to get as close as possible to explaining everything. But I think if we take a step back and just accept that there are so many things and there's so many aspects of our life that are just irrational
Yeah.
and that we don't have an explanation for, and that's okay, right? I think it's it's more okay to more healthy to accept the irrationality of things than to try to rationalize the irrational. Um, and I think that that is what faith is that believing in the irrational. Um, and and I think, a lot of times people are puzzled at when traumatic events happen, when things that occur, like horrible events happen in history, like wars, like natural disasters, etc. People always ask people who are victims of these things or have experienced them or whatever, and they're always amazed that for some reason those things strengthen the person's faith, like make them believe more in God. And part of it, I think, is you can find light at the end of the tunnel. But I think also, and I'm a strong believer that the light shines the brightest in the dark. But I also think part of it is when you have something happen that's so irrational and that you can't explain by any other, force or laws, or why is this happening? It makes no sense. Um, I think faith is accepting that there is no explanation for it. Um, but that it's happening for a reason. But that reason is undisclosed to you. And I have religious friends, I have non-religious friends, and who, like you said, have a tendency to go logic route when it comes to believing in God and try to make all the arguments and try to prove it rationally. And I don't think that's possible. Um, and I don't think that's definitive. And I don't think that is faith. Like I said, I think faith is believing in the irrational and accepting the irrational.
Yeah. No,
And I think
I agree. I sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that's what that clip really demonstrates. It's the irrational
Yeah,
that
it's believing in what you can't see, I
yeah.
think.
And
And
I
I
think
love, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I'll be honest, I actually have seen that. I haven't watched Young Sheldon like in full like season wise, but I have seen some episodes, and I have seen that episode, and I think what if I'm not mistaken, what troubles um Mary, I think is the mom's name, right? What troubles her is all these things happen that like she can't explain,
Mhm.
and that she doesn't see as like normal and the normal routine and what normally happens, and so that's what really uh burdens her faith and makes it tough and makes her question it. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
and I think it's also what strengthens it is recognizing
yeah,
the irrational.
for sure. I mean, what's interesting too is like, and this is actually a another in another one of the episodes, but there's a line that says something to the effect, and it's true. It's like if you don't question it, are you really authentically 100% believing it, right? If you close yourself off to the possibility of anything else, and this isn't necessarily true in every circumstance, but I think questioning it um, strengthens your belief in many ways. Yeah, for sure. I think that I personally do not feel it at all like I have to be able to prove something to think that it's true. I think a lot of people, especially as our society becomes more scientifically um, productive and more scientifically successful, feels the need to prove something to consider it fact, or not even fact, but a belief that somebody has. And I don't agree. I mean, there's plenty of things that I believe in that I can't necessarily explain, and or even come close to explaining, or even would ever attempt to explain. And while I think obviously our scientific advancements are incredibly powerful and incredibly useful, 99% of scientific discovery over the course of history has been proven to be incorrect. So you look back on all the things that we used to think were scientific fact, and now we laugh at some of the discoveries that we made. And I just wonder in 100 years what we're going to think of what we think today, right? So, and this isn't supposed to be an anti-scientific point, but like you just said, like you kind of corrected yourself. You're like, oh, that sounds bad. Like, I don't want to say that I'm opposed to science, but I think that's so ingrained in our society now that if you don't believe in proof and fact, that you're not doing your due diligence, right? And I don't think that's necessarily the case, like you said. And I particularly like how his first attempt, to go the scientific and logical route doesn't really do much for Mary. And like I said, it's the human side of it, the human attempt, that is more powerful and more successful in what he's trying to do, but as from the audience's perspective, is so much more powerful and so much more emotional, and so much more captivating
Mm.
from a literary, or not literary, from a cinematic perspective.
Respect.
So yeah, I think it's a really good scene.
It's just like one more note on the like the rationality thing. A lot of people I know and I've heard experiences about people who aren't religious and don't like believe in God ordinarily, don't have like really never believed in God. Um, the points when they're pushed to prayer is when something happens or something occurs where they have no more tools in their toolkit to solve the problem. That's when people are pushed to prayer, pushed to asking God.
Right.
When the tools of rationality are no longer there. And I think accepting, recognizing when that happens, when you're out of tools, is a really important part of life. And I think if there is, if there is a role for God in a state and in politics and in society, it's for the moments where you do not have tools. And it's I think it is really important. What separates a good leader from a bad leader, what separates a good decision maker from a bad decision maker, is recognizing when you don't have tools to solve the issue, when you don't have the means, when things are out of your control, right? It's deliberating about when you actually have the means to make something better and alleviate it and fix it, and when you don't. And I think, we could talk about all kinds of biblical things related to like irrationality and seventh day and whatever. But I think, for those who don't believe and or are trying to believe or are curious but not quite there, even those who are struggling to reaffirm their faith, I would say, look towards the irrational, things you can't explain, and be content with leaving your explanation at faith.
Yeah, for sure.